stuff. All right, everybody, welcome in. We are collaborating once again with Simon Short tonight of the Simon Short podcast. We are Sports and Money. We're also doing this in collaboration with Phantom Sports. Simon and I are doing a project that we have been looking forward to for weeks. We've been working on it for weeks. Simon, tell everybody what we're going to do tonight, man.
Ben, we are finally starting off our offensive line grading project that you and I have been talking about for a really long time. But we're going through every single team in the NFL. We're trying to figure out who their starting offensive linemen are going to be. We're also going to talk a little bit about their depth. And we're going to try to put a letter grade on every single one of them and figure out who's got the best offensive line headed into the 2022 season, starting tonight here with the NFC South. So really excited to get it kicked off and going.
We are so excited. I will tell the audience a couple of things. I'm using AirPods tonight. I have noticed on some of my videos, it throws my mouth off with the sound just a hair. So if that bothers you, I suggest just don't watch us and listen to us because the content is going to be fantastic. Okay. And that way you don't have to look at either one of us either. Right, Simon?
Yeah, that's always for the best. My forehead's a little shiny tonight. So just whatever. Just turn your display and settings on to never auto locks on YouTube.
Yes.
That way, because that's the big kicker. And just put the phone down and go do something around the house and enjoy nerding out with us about the offensive line.
And by the way, one more thing, we'll start with Buccaneers here in just a second. Simon's got a brand new baby he's been playing with the past couple of years and working with and everything, or past couple of weeks, sorry. And I've got a brand new job. So, yeah, it goes quick. So if there had been a couple of changes somewhere on the roster here that we miss or that happened before you actually, as an audience, watch this video, just kind of keep that in mind. And if any of you want to jump on with us next time, the next divisions we do, by all means, we will invite more offensive line nerds anytime you want to come across. Right, Simon?
Oh, absolutely, man. So if anybody, whether it's just like in life or in a comment section of an article or that I bring on one of my shows or do a show with you, who wants to like get me going for at least 5 to 10 minutes, where if they need to like do something else or whatever, they just mention the offensive line and I'll talk their ear off. So it could be anybody. So if you're out there and you want to talk about the 11th offensive lineman on your team who got signed to a futures contract and Ben and I forget to talk about it, by all means, we'd love to talk to you. So come on aboard.
We are fully capable of doing the video breakdown and coming back and doing an entire show on just that one player that we missed.
Absolutely. And I think I do want to also add, this is like an ongoing project for us. So by the end, we hope to have some kind of like recap show or ranking show or something. So we're going to continue to watch film on these guys and learn even more. So don't completely bash us for maybe what you see today, because in a couple weeks we'll probably have watched all of these guys another 2, 3, 4 times, and we'll have an even bigger kind of pool of film that we've watched. So we're excited to start this journey. We're excited for you guys to be here with us.
Well, we're starting the night with the NFC South, and that'll be this whole video will be the NFC South. And we're going to start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because I just don't know where else you would start. They've got an excellent chance to have an awesome team this year. The offensive line is the part of that. So, Simon, take us through who might probably be the 5 starters for the Buccaneers this year on the offensive line.
Yeah, so I think the offensive line, the projected starters, it's pretty clean cut. So from left to right, I have Donovan Smith, Aaron Stinney, Go Dukes, Ryan Jensen, Shaq Mason, and Tristan Wirfs. That's pretty, the tackles in the center are chalk from the last couple of years. Shaq Mason, the team traded for to replace Alex Kappa over at right guard. They traded for him. He used to play with Tom Brady. It seems pretty clear cut he's going to be the starter. Aaron Stinney has been a spot starter and rotation guy for the Bucs over the last couple of years. So now with the retirement of Ali Marpet from left guard, Stinney is the most likely person to kind of step into that role.
And Simon, before we start getting into any position battles or the depth, which I'll come into with just a second, it's obvious Aaron Stinney is the weak link of this offensive line, but you and I are big believers that if you have at least three good starters and the Tampa Bay has four,
Yeah,
that fourth and fifth guy, they don't have to be quality starters. They could be just plug in guys, and you can hide that pretty easily, especially if it's at the guard spot, I think. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here with Tampa Bay.
absolutely. And it's about figuring out what that offensive lineman is good at and the things you specifically need to cover up. So Stinney, for example, he's very physical, he's very strong, he's very good going in a straight line. So maybe when you're on the left side, you say, hey, you just need to either run straight ahead at the guy that's right in front of you or pick the guy that's closest to you and knock him on his butt. And Stinney can do that with anybody. If you want him to like run out and like try to find people or get out and pull, do something side to side, that's where his balance kind of goes off. Or if you have him go too far out, he leans a little far forward. So he loses that balance. But man, if there's a guy just over top of him and you just need him to push a guy back, he could definitely do that.
Simon, that's why we've got you on here, man. I mean, you just gave a total breakdown of Aaron Stinney's strengths and weaknesses, man.
I'm sorry, man. Go Dukes. Go Dukes, man.
Yes.
JMU alum. We got to stick together. Stinney was there when I was there, so I saw that guy play for years. So got to represent. Got to do it for my guy.
Absolutely. Which, by the way, you talked about Tampa Bay trying to kind of hide his weaknesses. Every NFL team at every position is trying to hide weaknesses
Yep.
all year. And every other team that you play is trying to exploit and expose those weaknesses. I mean, it goes on. It is a massive job to do that. You try to collect all the talent you can, but at that point, then it's about weaknesses and finding them.
Totally. Yeah. And there's not too many better guys to do that with when, he's not going to have to think too much on his own with Ryan Jensen next to him at center, calling everything out, Tom Brady behind him, and then, a talented player like Donovan Smith on his other side. So he's going to be in good position, I think, and have a pretty good year.
The starting five is lights out. They might be. We won't tell you guys until we do all the videos. They might be one of the best offensive line in football. We'll save that for the end when we do all the teams' grades together. But the depth, the depth is decent, but it's not great. I'm gonna rattle off some names real quick for you Tampa Bay fans, and you might even have another one to add on. So you got Fred Johnson, guard; Robert Hainsey, who tends to play the center spot; Josh Wells, who kind of tends to play the tackle spot; Nick Leverett, guard; Luke Gadecki, who they just drafted out of the third round, and then Sedarius Hutchison, who's in his second year. There are some guys here who you wouldn't mind coming in and playing for maybe 3 or 4 games. I don't know that there's anybody here that you're going to be excited about carrying through the postseason. So Josh Wells, for instance, he's a veteran, been around a long time, ton of experience, but there's a reason he's a backup. He's really not the guy you want starting. So if there were to be an injury somewhere in that top 5, a season ender, that would then mean you had 3 quality starters and then 2 guys who really kind of sort of should be backups. There's not really anybody here that I personally feel great about. Simon, I'll let you jump in on the depth here in just a second. But the depth isn't great. They kind of go, in my opinion, they kind of go about too deep here on the depth, meaning they can take about 2 injuries. But even then, there's going to be a huge drop-off between the guys who are starting and anybody who comes in to play after that. There will be a significant drop-off. So covering up one guy, Aaron Stinney, at guard, covering up his weaknesses, they can do that no problem all year long. But if a second guy has to come in and play, now you have 2 guys that you're trying to cover up for, and that could lead to a huge drop-off here. So they have some depth. It's not horrible by any stretch. They are prepared here, but there will be huge drop-offs. So, Simon, before we get into your grades, talk to me a little bit about anybody that you like here or don't like here depth-wise.
First off, Josh Wells, go Dukes. Next, but they've made investments in this offensive line over the last couple of years in the draft. Robert Hainsey was a guy that was a 3rd-round pick last year. He's played all up and down the line. So you talk about depth when it comes to offensive linemen and really any backup at any position. You want them to be able to do multiple things, wear multiple hats. So that's a guy who played mostly tackle in college and a little bit of guard and became a center essentially for the NFL. So a guy with a lot of experience, a really smart player. So I would be interested to see if he kind of steps into more of a swing interior guy this year as maybe a primary backup, which was
Right.
Stinney last year. Luke Gadecki was a second round pick this year, a guy that is supposed to be a physical run blocker, is a smart guy, but still a second round pick that we saw some offensive linemen go ahead of him that maybe were ranked a little bit lower on some boards, but still a second round pick. And Gadecki there, you would think that means that they have some hope. But again, young offensive linemen that aren't the top tier talent take some time to develop. So yeah, I think you're right. You don't want too many injuries and to rely too far down. Josh Wells, I'm sorry, my guy. Yeah, you've been around a long time. He had some tough moments in the playoff games last year. He got worked into, and what wasn't great. So you don't want too many injuries for sure.
It's one thing to have an injury in, say, October for 4 games, and you just kind of work through that through the schedule. Yeah. It's a huge difference when you have an offensive line that's this good, and now one of them isn't there anymore, and one of these other guys is coming into play in the postseason. That's really where you start to see teams like the Rams or like the Packers. Well, maybe not the Packers, but teams like the Rams start to take advantage because they are good enough to exploit some of this. You can get by with it in the regular season. All right, so the depth is decent, I think, but not great, not horrible is where I would put the depth. One quick question, and I did not prep you for this, so I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot here. Any chance at all that Luke Gadecki, that high draft pick, could take Aaron Stinney's spot, or is this a total lockdown for Aaron Stinney here at guard?
I think Aaron Stinney's going to have the chance to lose the job would be my guess. I'm going to guess having some championship pedigree, being around the team for a couple of years, he's going to walk in with it as his job to lose. But I think when it comes to any NFL position, and probably especially offensive line, nothing's locked up. Nothing's for sure. So yeah, I think Gadecki could push him. I think there's a world where maybe if Gadecki doesn't get it for week 1, we can not only see him push Stinney throughout the year, but maybe even Shaq Mason on the right side. So, we'll see. He's kicking into guard. He was primarily a tackle in college as well. So I think that'll give him a little bit of a learning curve, but, we'll see if he's smart, right? And he can pick up what Tom Brady needs him to do from day one. He's going to be in his good graces. So I think there's definitely a chance of that.
I think it's a good spot for Gadecki. I think he's got a place in this league. Maybe he doesn't necessarily find it this year, but this is a great spot for him. I mean, you come in, you get the post Tom Brady. I mean,
right.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
not much better for sure.
No, there's no pressure this year other than just for him to perform whatever he's put in. So.
Right.
All right. Well, give us a grade on the Buccaneers offensive line then this year. Where you think, all things considered, the starters, the depth, all things considered, what would be your grade projection for them for this season?
I mean, as a whole, you can. The thing with the offensive line, and the reason I think you and I love it so much, is you can grade all of the individual players one thing, but when you get to the big picture of it, it can look completely different. So, if we get into the individual grades as well, when I do those, they're good, right? If you grade everybody in a vacuum, but when you put them together for the Buccaneers, it's actually a lot better. I think the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? So when you have 2 really strong tackles in Smith and Wirfs, and then you have Ryan Jensen in the middle, no matter what you grade those guards at in that case, your group as a whole is going to be really strong. So I think this is easily like a B+ kind of group with potential for, to get into that A range somewhere, depending on how Stinney and Mason or possibly Gadecki play. But when your pillars are Tristan Wirfs, who I have as one of the better tackles in the entire league already, Donovan Smith, who's a solid left tackle, and then Ryan Jensen, who you love his IQ and his physicality. This is certainly a top echelon group. At least a B+ is where I have him right now.
I am right there with you. I'm going to put them at the A-. I was so tempted. I couldn't decide B+, A-. I'm right there. That's the range, though. It's not A+ for sure, and it's not a C. This is a very good offensive line. I'm going to stick them at A-. I think there's just enough depth there to where if they don't get just killed with injuries this year. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think they have 4 quality starters. So I've got them at an A-, but you and I are just right there on this offensive line. Again, unless they get 2 or 3 brutal injuries, knock on wood for you Buccaneers fans, this is going to be another good group for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to move on to the Panthers, and this will be a little bit different. We're not trying to bash the Panthers here. We'll take the same approach here, but walk me through. I'm sure this is not easy to pick out a starting 5 here, but maybe it is for you. Give us what you think probably maybe might look like a starting 5 for the Panthers this year.
Yeah, so the Panthers is tough. I mean, you look on the sites, and what I try to do when I'm figuring this out is not only go based off of what I know about the players and what they did in previous years, but I also like to get plugged into like the SB Nation sites or the Fansided and stuff like that, right. The different team blogs that are doing what you and I like to do as a whole, but just for that one team, right? So they really know the nitty gritty. You look at, so the offensive line that I kind of have picked out for them is based on that. Now, if you go to like ESPN depth charts, it's, you have to take it with a grain of salt. They're not diving in deep. They just know the names. The way I have it left to right is Ike Mekwonu, the 6th overall pick at left tackle. I have Brady Christensen at left guard. This is the one that I think is going to be maybe a bit of a surprise or question mark, but this is where I have Brady sliding in. I have Bradley Bozeman at center, who they just signed from the Ravens, Austin Corbett, the right guard, who they just signed from the Rams, and then Taylor Moton, the right tackle. So that's how I have it left to right. Brady Christensen is obviously the question mark. Pat Elflein is in that group. Michael Jordan is in that group. Cade Mays is a guy from the draft that I even like that could be in that mix. He's probably not quite there yet. It's probably more Michael Jordan and Pat Elflein, but we'll see. I have Brady Christensen there right now, though.
All right, and that's excellent, but that is not easy to do. And by the way, I'll throw this in. A lot of the general managers and the coaches right now, when they go to sleep each night, they don't know who's going to be the starting 5 for them in week 1. They're like, gee, I hope somebody in training camp steps up at right guard or left tackle or whatever the position is. And they are struggling with exactly what you and I are struggling with. And sometimes what you get down to, and I think this is the case for the Panthers, is you're going to have a couple of guys starting that you really don't want to be starting. And that's just the way it is. That's life in the NFL, life in sports. But that's an excellent job there trying to pick out a top 5. And basically, I'm not surprised at that starting top 5. Can you move these guys around? Yes. Some of these guys probably are going to move around. Ike Mekwonu, I was listening to your podcast the other day. Mekwonu can play anywhere but center, and they could probably teach him to play that, to be honest.
If they really wanted to.
If they really wanted to, yeah. So ideally, you'd like to just get him over at left tackle and leave him there. But sometimes you don't get to do that, especially when you have this many question marks all over the offensive line, and then when one injury hits, you've got to start. Some of these teams have to start moving pieces around. So not easy to put together top 5. What about the depth? Well, you've got Cameron Irving. You have Pat Elflein. You mentioned Michael Jordan. I think you mentioned Deontay Brown. You have Cade Mays, whom they drafted in the 6th round. Dennis Daly is there. In all honesty, there is very precious little depth here. There just isn't. There are very few guys here that when they come into the game, you're like, okay, we'll be okay today. There really aren't. Basically, these guys, for the most part, these backup guys that I just mentioned, when they come in the game, you're like, darn it, we're gonna have to send a tight end over there. We're gonna have to send a fullback over there. We're gonna have to roll the quarterback out the opposite direction. It's not going to be pretty here if somebody goes down, and it may not be pretty anyway here for the Panthers. But they have some people here, and if everything goes their way, and if a couple of these young guys kind of sort of step up, it might be a decent offensive line. So I'm not knocking that, but again, the depth here is a little suspect. They're going to need a couple of guys to really step up. I know somebody probably right now is screaming at me about Cameron Irving. And I get it. I was talking about it with Simon before the show. Cameron Irving is so athletic. He is so smooth. Watch him on video. Go check him out on YouTube if you're in the audience. He is unbelievably athletic. I cannot deny this man's athleticism, but he struggles to block. He struggles to get the guys on the second level. He gets pushed back by strong defensive ends. A lot of times he tends to play high, and edges get around him. So the blocking level there, even when and I know he started a lot in the league, but that's, to me, that's not great depth, but at least it's somebody. So I think the Panthers just need to hope somebody steps up and nobody gets injured this year. It's basically what we're looking at. Talk to me about your overall grade then for this Panthers team. I don't think we want to stay on this too long as we did the Buccaneers. But all things considered, the possible starting five and a little bit of depth here, what do you think here for this offensive line this year?
Really, I mean, for me, this group is based on these top five. I don't think this depth really adds anything to this group other than the fact that, yes, they have played some games, but like you said, they haven't necessarily played them very well. So this isn't even at Tampa Bay where it's some young guys who have some pedigree that it just is TBD, right? These are guys that have played a little bit and it hasn't been good. Cade Mays I really like, but again, he's a 6th-round rookie, so we'll see where he kind of settles. But if that's your best depth piece, at least from my opinion, that's not a great spot. So based on these top five, considering the investment that they've made in it, if I'm just basing it off of what I think they'll do this year, I think it's better than Panthers fans or NFL fans might think. I probably have them at about a C plus. Ikem Ekwonu is obviously, as an NFL player, unproven. We'll have to see how he does as a left tackle at the NFL level. You and I both think it's going to be great. And at worst, you put him in at left guard and he's going to be an all-pro kind of left guard. In which case, again, Brady Christensen, why I like him is he played left tackle in college, and I think he started the last 3 games of last season at left tackle after they moved him around a bit. So that could be an easy swap if they had to, instead of bringing a bench guy in, moving a guy one side to the other. Bradley Bozeman is a solid veteran center who has played in the AFC North and not done terribly. So that tells you he can hold his own and he's tough. Austin Corbett was a part of that really fun, zone blocking scheme with the Rams as a right guard, and he's solid. I'm very interested, especially from those 2 guys I just named, to see how they play together when you have the power running scheme of the AFC North and Bradley Bozeman next to the zone blocking scheme of Austin Corbett. I have no idea what the Panthers are planning on doing. If they think Bozeman is getting out on the run, out on the hoof, I don't think that's going to work out very well. If they think Corbett's going to stand there and be a man blocking scheme kind of guy, I don't know if that'll go well. So That's what puts me at like a C plus, just because I don't quite know what they're going to do. But I think Icky is going to elevate them as a whole. Taylor Moton is solid on the other side. They add 2 veterans. If they do the right thing, in my opinion, and take Brady Christensen, who started 6 games at 3 different positions last year, and say 17 games left guard, figure it out, I think they could be okay. So I'm going to put them at a C plus.
I'm with you there on Brady Christensen. I don't think he's yet shown that he is a quality starter in the NFL. But in his first year, I think he showed enough to where you're like, we're okay with this guy being on the field somewhere for our starting 5. I don't think there's any doubt about that, especially when you look at who else they've got anyway. So I think Christensen's going to be a starter somewhere. I do think Corbett is a good, decent guard in the league. I don't think you're worried about him necessarily. I think Bozeman is a good, decent starting center. And then I think you mentioned Moton, again, good, solid starting tackle. I think you just checked the boxes there with Moton. So I think you have 3 to 4 guys here. You're like, we're okay with this. And then you got that 5th spot. They're like, man, we need somebody to step up. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. And then, we got Pat Elflein and Cameron Irving who provide some level of depth here. I think the best thing I mentioned, you want somebody to step up and no injuries here for the Panthers. Some teams get lucky. That does happen for some teams each year, maybe the Panthers. Yeah. I think the best thing, you mentioned Cade Mays. I think the best thing that could happen to Carolina is that he steps up right away and shows that he can play in the NFL. And then that allows you to have Irving and Elflein back there as backups, and they're not great, but you can get by with them for 3 or 4 weeks. And that would solve a lot of problems. I'm with you. So grade-wise, I've got the Panthers as a flat D with a chance to move up to a C this year. That's kind of where I've got them. Okay. For me, I've got too many questions to actually just for me personally to vault them into the C category, but I do think they've got that chance this year. You mentioned that. I don't think they're as bad as maybe their reputation was last year. They weren't good last year. There's no question about it. But
Right.
when you kind of sort of start to look at the guys they've got here, 3 to 4 decent starters, and who knows how good Aquino will be in year one. Maybe he'll be lights out. Maybe he'll show some need to improve. But I love Aquino. And then I think you've got a couple of other guys there. I think they're okay. You know, but it could go the other way either. Sorry.
We're gonna spend. This is what we do. We get to offensive line. You said we were gonna be quick. We're not gonna be quick. I hate to break
We're not
you.
gonna be quick. Who am I kidding?
I'm surprised at your grade, even just simply based off of Icky was your top guy in the draft, and we talked about him for what felt like hours and hours talking about Aquino.
Yes.
I thought even him alone would kind of vault him up. Is that because you're just not sure about? Are you that worried about the rest of the group? Is it more about the depth? Or is it just, hey, we can't, as much as I like him as a prospect, we can't base their NFL grade on him just because we haven't seen him in the NFL yet?
I'll put it this way. Let me start with Aquino. Love Aquino. My experience with O linemen is that they generally don't reach their peak in year one.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times a wide receiver, year one, he's exploding.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even a quarterback, year one, they're starting to show flashes. From what I've seen, the offensive linemen generally, it could be year 7 or 8 before they reach their peak, before they really get to that true just master of universe kind of level. Mm-hmm. So I think Aquino will be very good in year one. It's everything else I'm worried about.
Got it. Yeah.
I'm worried about the depth. I'm worried about the Panthers as an organization. They seem to still kind of be scattered. That bothers me. You know, you mentioned it with Bozeman and I think Corbett. You know, zone versus man.
Yep.
That bothers me. I think I don't trust everything else here enough, even though I love Aquino, to bump them up into the C level. I think is where I'm at. And you know, again, I think they can get there, but I also think if they get 2 injuries, this could be one of the worst offensive lines in football. It could be that bad that quickly too.
Yeah, so. And that makes sense. And even on the individual graded players, and I mentioned at the top, for better or worse, when they come together, what can that mean? And I think they have a new offensive line coach this year because the Steelers have hired Pat Meyer, who was their offensive line coach last year. So between that, the 2 different scheme type players that they've brought in, we'll see what their scheme ends up being. And then, just adding 3 new pieces to the offensive line could mean it takes a little while to pick up. So I get that. That does make sense.
And also, I'll say this. People kind of, if the Panthers start off 1-7, everybody just kind of forgets about them.
Right.
But that offensive line could be working hard. And by the middle of the season, they might have it all figured out. And it might lead to them reeling off, 4 wins in 6 games. Mm-hmm. So what we see in September out of this group may be vastly different than what you start to get in November right around Thanksgiving. It could be hugely different for sure.
Totally.
All right. Well, that's the Panthers. We have different grades there, but I think you're looking at potential, and I'm looking at maybe pulling off last year's experience, basically, is the difference things there. The Saints. I think the Saints are fascinating. I think there's a lot going on here. Mm-hmm. To walk me through, I think this will be an easier starting 5 to pick than the Panthers was. Walk me through your starting 5 there for the Saints first.
Yeah, so starting 5 left to right, I have James Hurst, Andrus Peat, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Ryan Ramczyk. The big question mark / battle is going to be first-round draft pick Trevor Penning. Can he get into that group at any point? It's going to be on that left side somewhere if he does. Andrus Peat is a Pro Bowler. He missed all of last year essentially with an injury. So it's almost easy to forget that he's coming back. So he should come right back into left guard and be just fine. James Hurst was a guy that played, he at least 3 positions on that offensive line last year with all the injuries to Teron Armstead, Andrus Peat, Ryan Ramczyk. He played a lot of positions and played pretty well. So he's kind of I think, going to get that opportunity to be the starting left tackle, similar to Aaron Stinney with the Bucks. He's going to walk in with the opportunity to lose that position, and I don't think Penning's going to be the guy to get it. I think Penning's a guy that's going to take a year or two to develop. So I don't think he's a guy that's going to overtake Hurst. So that's the way I have it right now, left to right.
And that would be my starting five as well. I think it's much easier to pick this starting five than the Panthers for sure. It's a good starting five. It's not as good, I don't think. It doesn't look like it's going to be as good as the Buccaneers starting five, but this is a good, solid starting five for this year. The Saints shouldn't. They had some problems here on the offensive line last year, but if everybody gets back healthy and everybody starts to get settled in again, I think this is a very good offensive line. So I'm right with you there on the starters. Let me again rattle off the depth here. Trevor Penning, Ethan Greenidge, Gerald Hawkins, Forrest Lamp, Landon Young, Calvin Throckmorton, Josh Andrews. I think there's some decent depth here. Not guys that you're like, yes, we've been waiting for this guy to get in. But I think you've got guys here. I think you have four guys maybe, starting with Trevor Penning if he doesn't start. Gerald Hawkins, I think, has the chance to play decent as a backup. Landon Young, I think, again, has a chance to be a decent backup here. And then maybe even Josh Andrews at the guard positions. I think you have four guys here who, if they were maybe not in the playoffs, but if they were on the field for 4 weeks for an injury in the middle of the season, I think you're fine. And I don't necessarily think that the five starters are so dominant that there's going to be as big of a drop-off as there is, say, in Tampa Bay. So I like the depth here. I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's great, but I think it's pretty good. And so I think that's kind of where the depth sits. I will ask you this about Trevor Penning, or maybe I'll say this about Trevor Penning. I think he's going to be a starter in the league for a very long time, but I don't think he's ever going to be – I think he's always going to kind of be messy as a starter. I think he's probably always going to have a little bit of a penalty problem, a little bit of maybe he didn't get great technique on certain plays. I think that's just who he is. So I think he's going to be a good starter at this point, at some point for a very long time. But I think that's kind of who he is in his nature. But what would you put the chances of at Trevor Penning starting this year for the Saints?
Like week one, like coming up as the gates as a starter, pretty low.
Let's say middle of the season.
By middle of the season, I mean, just with the odds of an injury, if I could cheat that way and say 80% likely he's going to start, but I don't think based on play he's going to overtake anybody. I'll put it that way. I think if these guys are healthy, I think he's going to be on the bench this season.
I tend to agree. If for no other reason than I think the Saints think they have a chance at the playoffs this year, and I think they do in the NFC. Mm-hmm. So if Hurst, especially, let's take Hurst for example. I think he's probably the biggest question mark there. If Hurst looks at all decent over there at tackle, I think you leave him there, and I think you give Penning time. But sometimes you get pressure from the front office. Sometimes the general manager doesn't want to look bad, and sometimes you end up starting that rookie just so the general manager doesn't look bad. So we'll see. What's your grade for the Saints for this season, all things considered?
I'm right with you. They're not quite the Bucks, but they aren't that far off. I mean, we haven't even said his name that much. This is what happens with really good offensive linemen. You don't talk about him that much. Ryan Ramczyk is like an all-pro, Pro Bowl kind of guy. I mean, this guy is one of the best right tackles in the entire league. And it starts there. And like you said, if James Hurst is the guy we have the biggest question mark on because he's playing left tackle, which is obviously a high-profile position, but he came off of a really good year last year. He's got a Pro Bowl veteran next to him in Andrews Pete. This is a good group. So I had the Bucks at a B+. I think the Saints are just a tick below them, and I have them at a B.
Fair enough. And I will say this. I'm a little bit lower, but I struggled. I think part of it is the Andrews Pete injury that's bothering me because I think I'm working off of memory banks here. I think it's been maybe past 2 seasons or 2 of the past 3 seasons where maybe injuries have kind of dragged him down a little bit. I think when he's healthy, he's excellent. And then also I think there was a question with James Hurst. I think he's an excellent backup. Can he actually hold down a starting spot in the NFL? I think he probably can. but I struggled whether to put them as a C plus or a B minus. But I ended up being a B minus here. Overall, I like this offensive line.
Yeah.
I think
And
they've
that's a
got
fair
five
point on
guys here. Yep.
that's a fair point on Pete. Last time he played, he's only played 15 games, started 15 games once in his career, and that was back in 2016.
Okay. All right.
Since then, it's been 14, 13, 10, 13, and 6. So, I mean, 3 of those years with those injuries, he was named a Pro Bowler, which is pretty impressive. But yeah,
Right.
injury-wise. So now we're talking about if you average it out and say Pete's going to play 12 of the 17 games and the other 5 is Calvin Throckmorton, that could knock it down a little bit. So I'm with you there. That makes sense.
It could. So you're at I think you said B plus or you're at B, just a straight
yep.
up B. Yeah,
You got it.
and I'm at a B minus. I do think the Saints have done a good job here. I think they've got the depth. I think they've got 6 guys who could maybe start, and not too many NFL teams have that. I think 5 of them are going to be good, decent starters. So I like what the Saints have going on here this year. Not as good as the Buccaneers, but I think this is a good Saints offensive line. I don't think if the Saints lose this year, I don't think it's going to be the offensive line's fault for the most part. Unless they're playing a really top tier defensive line this season. So that's where I've got them at B minus for the Saints. That leaves us with the Falcons. The Falcons have 103 players coming into training camp for the offensive line this year.
I love it. That's what I want to see. That's what I want. Give me 20 different units to watch, and we'll just do that all day. I'm good with that. That sounds like a blast.
Falcons, if you're listening, both Simon and I are available to come down and grade your offensive line during training camp or during the regular season. We will sit in the luxury box and grade these guys if we need to, but we won't do it for free. So we might do it for free, but
I might do it for free. That was generous of you. I might do it for free.
In all seriousness, the Falcons had a dreadful offensive line last year, but there's a ton of experience here. So Simon, walk us through the starting 5 here that projected for the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, starting 5 should be the same as last year, and which is pretty close to the same as the year before. And the year before that, you got Jake Matthews. So from left to right, you have Jake Matthews, Jalen Mayfield, Matt Hennessy, Chris Lindstrom, and Caleb McGarry. So we should see all 5 of those again. Nothing really stood out as a potential position battle for me.
And I think for me, when you looked at the Buccaneers and when you looked at the Saints and maybe even the Panthers, I think you could kind of identify a couple of players who could be stars. In the Buccaneers case, 3 to 4 players. In the Saints case, probably 2 guys. In the Panthers case, maybe 1. I'm not sure that anybody on this Falcons starting 5, it may be Chris Lindstrom, possibly. I'm not sure he's there yet. He's very good. Lindstrom's very good. But I think the Falcons are not only looking for starters, I think they're looking for guys to be absolute studs. We know the Buccaneers have studs. We know the Saints have a couple. The Falcons maybe with Chris Lindstrom. Jake Matthews has been in the league for a long time. He's not what he used to be. There's a ton of experience there, but I don't think I don't think the talent level projects to be as good as what the Saints and the Buccaneers have. Do you think that's a fair assessment for the starting 5 here?
I think so. I mean, between of those 5, you have 216 games started, which is obviously a big number. Now, most of that is Jake Matthews. He's been in the league for 8-9 years now, I want to say. And then every year, I will commend them for every year they've added to this offensive line. Chris Lindstrom, 2 years ago, was a first-round pick. Caleb McGarry, 3 years ago, was a first-round pick. So they're adding. And I think Matt Hennessy was a high draft pick too. Jalen Mayfield was a 2nd round pick. So they're adding talented pedigree type guys, and they're hoping they come together to at least form a good group. But yeah, I think you're right. On an individual level, nobody on this group really stands out, surprises me, because I mentioned those 216 starts, 1 Pro Bowl appearance, and that was 1 year of Jake Matthews, and that was in 2018. So yeah, really, on an individual level, I don't see it. But as a group, I think they're hoping these guys come together, especially this will be Mayfield's 2nd year, Hennessy's 3rd year, Lindstrom's 4th year. So I think they're hoping this is the year they all kind of come together.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I this is where it starts to get complicated grading some of these teams. I'm going to come in on a kind of a low grade on the Falcons here in a minute, but the experience is there.
Mhm.
If they can all get to working together here, stay healthy, work together, um, if they can find some way to kind of get some pressure off of this offensive line a little bit from somewhere with the offensive weapons quarterback, I think that would help. I think they're still waiting on Caleb McGarry and Jalen Mayfield to kind of fully develop into the guys that they're hoping for. So let's talk about the depth for a second. Excuse me. I apologize. Elijah Wilkinson, Jermaine Afidi, Drew Dahlman, Rashad Coward, Colby Gossett, Justin Schaefer, sixth round draft pick, Tyler Vrabel, Leroy Watson, Rick Leonard. There's a lot of people coming in here to camp here to battle for maybe, probably not a starting job, but for these top backup jobs. They have a couple of guys here. Elijah Wilkinson, I think, is a good, decent backup. I think they wouldn't mind if he came in and played 4 to 8 games this year in case of injury. Jermaine Afedi, Fetty's got a lot of weaknesses, but he also has the experience. I think they would be okay if he came in and started for 2 to 4 games this year due to injury. Drew Dahlman at center, I think they would be fine if he came in and started at center for 2 to 4 games this year. After that, it starts to dry up a little bit, maybe with Justin Schaefer, you never know. But I don't think there's a huge drop off here between a couple or three of the guys who are starting versus the guys that come into play. So I think they can withstand a couple of injuries here. And it sounds weird to say that the Falcons are actually built to withstand injuries better than maybe the Buccaneers to a degree. But again, that's part of that is that they don't have dominant guys here starting. So I think if there are some injuries here for the Falcons at the offensive line, I don't think there's a huge drop off here in talent level necessarily that they can't work their way through the seasons, right? Again, I don't necessarily think offensive line is going to be dominant, but I don't think it's going to be the reason the Falcons lose this year. I think there's a lot of other holes on the Falcons that are worse this year. So
Yeah, there's a lot more to worry about, I think.
there is. Again, this offensive line is not going to be great, but it's not going to. I don't think it's going to be the embarrassment that that some other teams are maybe going to be this year. So
Yeah.
come in with your grade overall, starters, depth, everything all considered. What's your grade on the Falcons?
So I think already here in our first video, I'm learning that I really care about how much this group plays together. Even though, so I'm really torn now. I'm doing this one more on the fly because, yeah, I mean they were just so bad last year. So does it get that much better to bring them back? Here's the thing: if Mayfield takes a step up and becomes the player that he was projected to be early in the draft process 2 years ago, this group could get up to the C plus B minus range. And I like some of the things that he does. The hard part about projecting is figuring out what this team is going to look like this year. This team is not going to be the same. They're not going to have the same offense that we've seen them have over the last couple of years because they're going from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota at quarterback. So now we're kind of trying to project, okay, if this team truly goes to full Ryan Tannehill, Tennessee Titans offense, but they don't have a Derrick Henry, right? How good does Ryan Tannehill look without Derrick Henry? Well, we saw that for a bit of last year. It's not nearly as good. The offensive line didn't look nearly as good last year without Derrick Henry and Tennessee running behind them. So I think this group for me is somewhere, I have a feeling you're going to be much lower, but probably in the D plus to C minus range. And that's contingent on what kind of step does Mayfield take in year 2? And what does this offense choose to do? If we're just kind of saying, okay, this is what they were last year, are they going to be that much better? On paper, you say no, but maybe there has to do some different things that fit their skill sets a little bit more. And another year of cohesion could help them. I think they could get up to that C plus range. I don't like the D plus sounds a little harsh for, again, what I value in terms of the cohesion, playing together, the experience. So I'm going to say C minus for them, which I think is still kind of fair, but I might be being a little nice. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I'm going to come in lower, but I will say one reason I think I come in lower on some of these things is because maybe I've spent maybe too much time at the college level or looking at the college stuff. And I think I've seen so much of the top programs continue to be top every year. And the bad programs, sometimes they'll bring back a whole boatload of seniors, but the seniors weren't that good in the first place. And so they still just kind of get steamrolled by the good programs. So that might be why in the NFL, I'm not giving enough credit to experience here at the NFL level. But that just kind of is going to explain some of this grade. I'm at a flat D here for the Falcons, but like I would put the arrow in the C direction, not in the F direction. I don't think this is going to be another disaster for the Falcons. If Jake Matthews can just kind of not get too much older all at once,
right?
If he can just kind of continue to be some semblance of what he's been his whole career, that's a huge start. I do think Chris Lindstrom is a stud with maybe a chance to be a star. I think he has the potential to be that good. Yeah. He's already pretty good.
Right.
He's got the chance to be a whole lot better. Hennessy at center isn't great, but he's fine. Mm-hmm. And then if with Dahlman coming in at center, you'll be okay. You know, not a huge drop off there. Then you go to McGarry and Mayfield, which I think are that's the guys you're waiting to grow up right there, waiting to develop, especially Mayfield. So I think they have a better chance of getting better this year than they do of getting worse, is what I'll say. And I think, unlike the Panthers, who I don't think the Panthers can handle any injuries. I think the Falcons could actually handle a couple of injuries here and still kind of push on through. So
yeah,
that's where I am here. I'm a flat D, but I think they've got a chance to even push up into that C category this year for the Falcons.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. Well, man, I don't know how long we just did, but boy, if anybody's still watching, thank you for watching. That's the NFC South. We're going to do all 8 divisions. And then after that, we're going to turn back around and produce overall grades. Overall rankings. And then we'll probably go back through and give you maybe the top 5 or the top 10 at each position on the offensive line this year. And then we're probably going to go back through. I didn't address the elephant in the room. PFF got their rankings out before we did this year. And me and Simon have purposely not looked at those rankings. What we'll probably do after we do all of our work, or we've done it, after we produce all of our work, we'll probably curl back through and look at PFF's list on air. We won't hand out their grades, but we'll look at their rankings and, kind of see how our lists measure up and just see what the differences are and see what their value and what we're valuing. So, Simon, I have enjoyed it, man. This has been awesome.
Ben, me too. We could do all 7, the rest of them tonight if you really wanted, and I'll be ready to go. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you all for listening and being with us, because we love this stuff and can't wait to do the rest of them with you guys.
And next offseason, by the way, I enjoy PFF's work. We're not hammering on them. Next year, we were trying. If Simon hadn't had a baby and if I hadn't had a job, then we were going to get our list out before PFF did this year. It just didn't happen. Next year, maybe.
Darn babies. Darn babies. Yes. What were they thinking?
Mine all came out late, all 3 of them. We had to drag them kicking and screaming into this world.
Nope, she was early. She was ready.
Yeah.
She wanted to see the offensive line rankings. That's what happened.
Yes, that's exactly it. My kids are like, nope, don't care. We're good right here. All right.
Love it.
Well, tell everybody real quick if they want to read or hear more of your work, where they can find that at.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys can find me over my written work over at phantomsportsindustries.com. It's right there above Ben's head. You can listen to my podcast over Ben's Left Ear, which is the Simon Short podcast on Apple and Spotify. Right now I'm going through and doing off-season reviews of all the divisions of the NFL. Going a little in depth. Ben has hosted some excellent quick hitting videos on the same subject for Phantom Sports and on Sports and Money. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on the podcast as well. Ben was actually a guest on one of those segments. I think we went 2 hours on the AFC West. So if anybody really needs to spend some time doing something, go listen to that. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Simon_Short. You can see all my work there as well. So appreciate it.
Yeah, if you're one of those people who like, quick 5-10 minute captions, me and Simon are not the people for you.
Nah.
I don't think, Simon, have you ever produced a podcast less than an hour long? Maybe once.
Literally once. Literally
Okay.
once.
Literally once. Yes.
Yeah, one time, and I think it was like my third one, and I was like, never again. What was that? That was nothing.
I produce 20 and 30-minute YouTube videos all the time, but I'm dying as I do it because there's stuff all over the cutting room floor. I feel like I'm cutting out
Hmm.
my own arms and legs as I do it. It's like, man, I'm so much more I could have talked about, but oh well.
Every time, every time.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have more of this coming. We will see you next time. Have a great one. Goodbye.